Historically, advanced societies that wanted to have a government of the people and by the people gradually entrusted the management of the state to a group, a council or a parliament. In ancient Rome or Greece, or in London, Paris or Washington in more recent times, modern democracies have designated a place where elected citizens, on behalf of the nation, could scrutinize the government's actions, analyze and make legislation, and receive the oath of the king or president as head of the executive branch. There, majority against the opposition, they engage in debate about the future of the country, its budget, its domestic and foreign policy, and so on. This is the common house of all the citizens, which is why it is called the Palace of the Nation. Ours dates from 1779 and is the work of French architect Barnabé Guimard. Originally, the palace housed the Sovereign Council of Brabant. In 1830, after the revolutionary days of September, when the tumultuous events took place just a few meters below its windows, the building became the formal site of the National Congress, which would give the newborn nation of Belgium a parliamentary monarchy and one of the most liberal and modern constitutions of its time. For a long time it remained the envy of many countries and was emulated around the world. Since the swearing-in of the first king of the Belgians, Leopold of Saxe-Coburg, at the Place Royale on the 21st of July, 1831, and the establishment of the Parliament that same year in the Palace of the Nation, the executive branch and the legislature have faced each other from opposite sides of the Royal Park in Brussels. The Parliament has two chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And it is here, to the House of Representatives, that we send our representatives, once known as deputies, based on federal elections which are held in principle every 4 years. Currently, there are 150 members of the House. Members sit in this beautiful debating chamber built by Van der Straten shortly after the 1830 revolution. Each member physically occupies a seat which is assigned to him or her, and members belonging to the same party or who have the same political leanings come together to form a political group or parliamentary group. Within these groups, discussions take place and political strategies are defined for introducing, analyzing, and voting bills into law. The parliamentary year or session traditionally opens, in accordance with the Constitution, on the second Tuesday of October and begins with the definitive election of the House Board. Elected members then examine the priorities of the government and start work on the evaluation and ratification of the budget for the following year, a state budget that they endeavor to adopt by December 31st. At the start of the session, the deputies elect a president from among their ranks. The president sits atop the pyramid in the president's chair overlooking the speakers to symbolize the power and sovereign authority of the nation over its directly elected representatives. The role of the president of the House is vital. He or she represents the House and is its official spokesperson. In consultation with the presidents of the parliamentary groups meeting within the Conference of Presidents, the President of the House directs and coordinates the work, keeps order, and may even refer to the Supreme Administrative Court to seek their opinion on the validity of a private member's or government bill. The President serves, in a way, as the arbiter of debates and the time allotted to each subject. It is the President who is the first to consider oral parliamentary questions to the government and judge their admissibility. The essential role of the House is to serve as a counterweight to the executive branch, acting as the sole entity responsible for evaluating the government's work in accordance with Article 101 of the Constitution. This is done through questions and parliamentary debate, interrogations, votes of confidence, and the vote on the adoption of budgets. The government sits on benches reserved for it, facing the Speaker's chair, that is to say, facing the President and the lectern of the member making a speech. The House also adopts laws. It may receive a bill from the government or introduce a private member's bill, which has to be examined in committee, debated, and, if appropriate, passed. At any time, the members may challenge the government as a whole, even raising the issue of confidence in the government, which involves a vote. A quite different exercise consists of putting a parliamentary question to one minister in particular, because problems have arisen and clarification is required, or because the member wishes to bring something to the attention of the minister or obtain additional information. Questions may be asked either in plenary session or in a public meeting of one of the House committees. A parliamentary question and its answer do not lead as such to a vote or raise the issue of confidence in the government. The minister who has received the question may decide to respond to the member either at the lectern or from his or her seat on the government bench when the exchange is very brief. The House of Representatives is divided into at least two parts. There is what is known as the government majority, which is all the members of Parliament that comprise or support the government. Sometimes broader majorities may be formed. This is the case for major structural reforms of the state. Some votes are free votes, i.e. left to the judgment of members. This is especially the case in certain ethical or moral debates. The opposition sits beside the majority. The opposition consists of parties who oppose the government. The votes of opposition are counted together, like those of the majority. Members discuss the state accounts called the federal finances. Estimates of revenue and authorizations of expenditure together form the federal budget. To verify public spending, the House may ask for assistance from the Court of Auditors, which also makes an annual report and can have relevant matters referred to it. The vote on the annual federal budget is a very important political exercise. The presidency of the House, like the presidency of the Senate, has a residence at its disposal, with meeting rooms, official reception rooms, the services of the presidency and the board, where the president in office works or receives visitors. The mansion or residence has its own entrance and grand staircase. Its official rooms and offices are decorated with works that form a part of the artistic heritage of the state. It is also a showcase for the richness and cultural diversity of the federal entities. The President can thus refer to the symbolism and importance of these works to visiting dignitaries. The President of the House is, in all cases, the spokesman and representative of the institution. As previously mentioned, he is the arbiter of House debates and proceedings. Questions or legislative proposals are submitted to him. His job consists in working with the board and the Conference of Presidents to optimize the parliamentary agenda, bearing in mind the priorities of the majority, but without neglecting the rights of the minority or opposition parties. The process of passing a bill is longer and more complex than one might think. Before being introduced in the House, the text of a bill may already have made the tour of its prestigious corridors, under the watchful and symbolic gaze of some of the state's greatest figures, in order to garner the broadest possible support for the proposed text even before it is introduced. This is one way to ensure a majority in favor of the text. Once brought before the House, the bill is scrutinized, debated, and sometimes even amended. These technical and political discussions occur within the standing committees of the House, which are composed of elected representatives of the various parties of the majority and the opposition, who bring their own expertise and political views to bear in discussing, challenging, or amending the text of the measure. This is where the real parliamentary work, less visible to the general public, takes place. When a text obtains a majority in the committee vote, the process takes it back to the House board so that it may either be adopted by a plenary session or sent back to committee for further discussions. The large paintings that adorn the walls of the oldest rooms reflect the heyday of parliamentary work and recall some of the crucial moments and ceremonies of our history. These House committees investigate matters of national defense, justice, health, and finance, for example. Other special committees deal with subjects as diverse as naturalization, military procurement, or rail safety. After discussions in committee, the bill returns to a plenary session of the House. These sessions are public meetings, and the voting in the House traditionally takes place on Thursday afternoons. It is then that the definitive fate of a bill is decided. The bell rings. Voting is about to take place. Members return to their seats and prepare to use the individual electronic voting system. Vote. Results. The results of the vote are displayed on numeric displays on either side of the debating chamber, presenting the majority's wishes. If the bill is passed, it then becomes law by royal assent and after publication in the Belgian official journal, Le Moniteur Belge or Belgisch Staatsblad. As from the date of this official publication, ignorance of the law is no excuse. This debating chamber is certainly one of the centers of power in a democracy. It is also here, before the two assemblies, the House and the Senate, in joint session of the elected bodies, that the king swears the constitutional oath that makes him the chief magistrate of the state. I swear that I will observe the constitution and laws of the Belgian people, to maintain national independence and territorial integrity. The Palace of the Nation has also kept up with more modern times. Recently, it acquired new committee rooms, the European Room and the International Room. The names of both rooms, which are sometimes also used for meetings with the press, evoke Belgium's role at the heart of European and international politics, two sectors which are fundamental to the powers and responsibilities of the House. On the way to the other wing of the palace, we leave the green carpets reserved for members of the House and discover the red carpets of the Senate. The Senate also has a presidency which carries out the representative function of the state. And here we see the Hall of Quaestors. This political institution, consisting of elected representatives, establishes the budget and expenditure for the parliamentary assemblies, proposes the appointment of staff, and manages the material needs of parliamentary work. The Senate, which sometimes used to be referred to as the upper house, was by its nature reserved for citizens of more mature years, as senators had to be over the age of 40. Over the years, it was also considered that it should represent the intermediate administrative bodies of the state. For a long time, there were provincial senators, and since the reforms that moved Belgium towards a federal model, also senators known as community senators. Lastly, below the senatorial gold and purple, co-opted senators also took their seats. Their acknowledged expertise is intended to guarantee the conduct and expertise of substantive debates. Not to mention the senators by right, such as the children of the royal family, who may one day, perhaps, accede to the throne and therefore be expected to be familiar with the work of the nation's elders. The Senate may require clarification from the government on this or that point, but it no longer scrutinizes the work of the executive branch itself, except in international affairs, because it is in this field, that of international and European treaties in particular, that it has developed its expertise and debates. In a Belgium currently undergoing radical change, the Senate has lost some of its traditional substance. The senators are increasingly focused on the major societal debates, whose value and importance is universally acknowledged. The end of life, medically assisted reproduction, euthanasia, criminal proceedings, and the spirit of the law, and so forth. In the future, the Senate may continue to exist, but in a form with increased representation, as the House of Federal Entities, representing the interests of the regions and communities, just as Germany's Senate has done. The Senate would no longer be in permanent session, but rather meet just once a month. And so we come to the end of this visit to the center of Belgium's parliamentary democracy. Returning via the ground floor of the Palace of the Nation, one cannot help but reflect that it was here, in this less prestigious room than the debating chambers on the upper floor, that the tough negotiations were held on the new reform of the state and the formation of a government after the most protracted political crisis in the history of Belgium. Regardless of the evolution of these institutions and their ultimate destiny, let us always remember that it was to win the right to suffrage and democratic representation that revolutionary and subsequently more political battles have taken place here since 1830. To provide citizens with a place and a system of representation for their individual and collective interests. And thus, to meet this desire for democracy, a political system of decisions by the people and for the people, where only the people are sovereign. At times, this system may appear complex or too slow, but we should remember the words of former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. This Palace of the Nation is the symbol of the equal rights and duties of all citizens. This is the common house, symbolizing our ability to live together. Thank you.